The Connector Next Door is your invitation to meet the natural connectors all around us. They represent the everyday event planners who are energizing their communities every single day. Their stories are familiar, fun, and full of charm. Your host, Lisa Garrow, is a lifelong event planner and has been a connection strategy coach for over a decade. She knows events can become energized connecting points where communities can gather and grow. Let's listen in as she strikes up a conversation with today's Connector Next Door.
Trish Tutton helps organizations and individuals learn to use mindfulness to reduce stress and anxiety so they can thrive in life and at work. After years working in cultures where stress and burnout were seemingly the only way to success, Trish suffered a shocking loss, and things became clear. Stress is unavoidable, but it doesn't have to dictate our lives. As a speaker and mindfulness teacher, Trish has taught the skills to live and work happier to thousands of professionals and has created positive change for her clients. They become happier, more productive, effective, and successful without the busy badge of honor. In our conversation today, Trish shares with us what it means to remember who we are by reconnecting the parts of us that have been scattered. You can find her as a teacher on the #1 free meditation app in the world, Insight Timer, and she's the author of the Mindfulness Mornings Journal. Her warmth and wisdom shine through in her coaching and training, and just as much in this conversation. Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Connector Next Door. And I am just running next door, just virtually here over Zoom, to one of my favorite playgrounds, to Banff here. The Rocky Mountains here in Canada are gorgeous. I love spending time with my girls in the Rockies. That's a great little playground for us to go play. Thank you so much for joining me, Trish, from all the way from Banff today.
Yeah, thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me, Lisa.
I'm a little jealous because you get to live and play in the same place in Banff. And the work that you do, I'm sure, has been something that has expanded to maybe people that haven't been thinking about what mindfulness means and really what does taking yourself away from the busyness mean. People are so hungry for it now. I'm glad that we get this chance to have the conversation today. Tell us a little bit about where you're coming from today, a little bit about your practice, and then we'll jump into what connection means to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been living in Banff now in the Rocky Mountains in Canada for 10 years. It was supposed to be just a little bit of a 6-month stint and completely changed my life. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned just the changes over the last few years. I think, while maybe in the last 10 plus years, people have been aware of this teaching, this practice, these tools that come from mindfulness traditions, which are thousands of years old. I think what's really shifted in the last 2 years is that folks have really seen the impacts of long-term chronic stress, anxiety, and they're really, they've felt those impacts, those negative impacts in their life. And I think, many people are drawn to the practice of mindfulness when, as they say, you kind of hit rock bottom, when you maybe have nowhere else to go, nothing else to try. You've tried everything to manage your stress. You kind of hit this moment where you're like, okay, I need something. And that old excuse that a lot of us have of like, oh gosh, one more thing added to my to-do list. I don't have the time. I'm too busy. I just don't have the type of mind that likes to slow down or get quiet. Those excuses start to fall by the wayside because people are just really suffering and need something. So I think, in general, mental health rose to the top of a lot of people and a lot of organizations' priority list through the last 2 years. And mindfulness is really it's an ancient tradition, but it's also a really data-based, research-based, data-driven technique and practice that we know, the data is there to back it up, that it can help folks with stress management, anxiety management, boosting their resilience, their ability to move through life with optimism and positivity, and really overall, I think just add fulfillment to people's lives. So yeah, that's what I've really seen happen in the last couple of years. And it's just been a real pleasure of mine to be able to teach individuals. And I, teach in corporate settings as well, just to give people, it's like tools for navigating life. That's what I call it.
Who doesn't need that?
Foundation. Yeah. Just like, how do we navigate this life that is sometimes chaotic and stressful and uncertain and overwhelming? And is there something that can help us? A mindset, a practice. And so, yeah, it's been really nice to be able to teach folks who are keen and interested and excited to learn these techniques.
I love that. And even as you're talking about, many of us are probably feeling it as you're saying it. So myself included, and I went through burnout when I was younger, early 20s, and it's something I preach about. I stand on my soapbox, but even for me over the last couple of years, it's been very intentionally staying away from some of those things that pull me down as well. And it's interesting. I was talking to my husband. We talk sometimes about hitting bottom. What does that actually mean when you've hit bottom? Like, when do you say when? Like, when is the breaking point? Like, you don't really recognize it sometimes. Right. He read something, or I don't know where it came from, but hitting bottom can also mean hitting bedrock, like where you really find that foundation of who you are. And I love that visual for me. The picture of that is really where it's not about now there's this bottomless pit where you just keep falling, but there's a place where we get to where, exactly like you're saying, how do we build from that? How do we actually pull ourselves to a place where mindfulness is not just what we call a practice, but where it's something that is just incorporated in our everyday?
Sure, absolutely. It becomes a way of moving through the world. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit. This is called The Connector Next Door, and you and I have connected. This is actually the first time we're seeing each other. We've had a couple of phone calls and emails and some connections over the summer, but when we talk about connection here, it really is about you as a natural connector. And I've seen that in the work that you're doing, in the master classes that you put out there, the way that you speak about connecting with ourselves and connecting with others. How would you actually define the word connection? And what does connection mean to you?
It's so integrated actually into my practice of mindfulness. Like, that's where my mind goes first, actually, because there is, like, let's face it, we live in this world that is just like constantly pulling us in so many directions, all of those directions are away from ourselves. Right. And actually there's one of the actual definitions of like the ancient word that we've turned into mindfulness is to remember. And so we might think of like, oh, well, remember means like to not forget, right? Like forgetting is the opposite of remembering. But actually, if you take like remember, it's actually the opposite of to dismember, which maybe sounds a little bit morbid, but I like to think of it like the old, maybe not even old, they probably still do this, like a magician would like take their assistant and they cut them up into a bunch of pieces. And it's like, oh, their legs over here and their arms over here and their heads over here in the room and they're dismembered, right? That visual to me, like when I think of disconnection, I also think of the opposite, disconnection. That's what I feel like when I'm in disconnection. It's like, and it's not necessarily my body parts that are strewn all around. It's actually my mind. My mind is like, there's part of it that's like thinking about something from 10 years ago. There's part of it that's like thinking about a conversation I had yesterday. And did I say the right thing? And why didn't I say that thing? Because that would have been better. And why didn't I take this path in life? Or what if I had done this? Or then there's parts of my mind that are like shuffling off into the future and just thinking, what's going to happen? As an entrepreneur, is the business going to be there in 6 months, a year, 10 years? What's my financial situation going to be like? What's my relationship going to be like? What about my family, my loved ones? I mean, we could go on and on. So that to me is like disconnection. So there's a big part of my own personal practice of mindfulness that is like remembering and reconnecting, bringing the parts of me that have scattered, bring them back here to my body, back here to this present moment, and be able to really recognize like what's going on in my thoughts today, what's going on in my heart today, and my emotions, what's happening in my body, and reconnecting and listening. I think that's a piece of connection too. Whether we're connecting to ourselves, other people, we have to listen. And that can also be a mindfulness practice and a reconnection practice, because a true sense of listening is not what we often do. It's we listen just to respond. We listen and then we're in our head. What am I going to say? How am I going to argue my point? How am I going to make my, point to them? But real listening, there's a quote I love that I always reflect on when I think of listening. It's leaning in and being willing to be changed by what we hear. That's how you connect. That's how you connect to yourself. That's how you connect to others. Listen and be willing to be changed.
Wow.
A few thoughts.
Beautiful thoughts. I wonder too, sometimes when we think about reconnecting, and I work with so many people that are producers, right? They're out there producing, they're kind of giving themselves to a project or to an event or to a thing, whatever the thing is that they're creating. And there's a lot of demands on time, on our energy, on our resources. When you talk about remembering, what is it, if we're not familiar with that action, what is it that takes us there? How do you work with some of your clients or the people in your community where you show them how that even happens? We talk about that sometimes, but we don't sometimes sit down and think about or really take to heart, what does that mean to make it happen?
Yeah. First step, I think, is noticing. It's so interesting that you've said some of these words, centering. Literally, I just taught a yoga class last night based on a theme of centering. So it's very timely. And I was actually speaking with this last night and saying, it's so funny because I love yoga. I love mindfulness. I love meditation. And it can be known as a little bit woo-woo, a little bit flaky, but I also have a part of me that is so rooted in reality and skeptical, actually. So I started to teach this class last night about centering, and I was like, there's so many. I've been doing this work for over a decade, and sometimes I just want to roll my eyes because people use these words they're just off the, I need to center myself. And sometimes I'm like, what is that? And so it's cool for me because I get to get curious and really figure it out. So to me, to recenter, is kind of about coming back to the present moment. I like to think of images, right? So maybe it's a wheel, and it's similar to being dismembered and remembering, right? All parts of you going off on the spokes of the wheel and then coming back to the hub, or a teeter-totter where it's parts of you might go to the past and that tilts the teeter-totter. One way parts of you go to the future, that tilts the teeter-totter. The centering is coming back into a place of balance, right? A place of authenticity of who am I really? Am I thinking and speaking and acting based on who I really am, or am I way off of that point of center? And I think there's kind of two key things. It's that first and foremost, you have to build the awareness, and mindfulness helps us with this, to notice when you are out of center, when you're, you could call it away from your center, right? When you've gone away. Because if you don't know that you've gone away, how do you even know to come back? Right? So you have to build this awareness, and it's self-awareness is really what it is, which is one of the biggest skills we teach and we learn when we practice mindfulness. We have to be able to notice, when have I gone away from my center? So that might be times, and we're all unique, but I know for me, it's when I am stuck in a bit of a trance of consuming social media, I'm definitely away from my center. I'm not even here. I'm just in my phone, right? I can't feel my body. I'm not noticing what's happening in my body. I'm not noticing sensations. I'm just in it. Or maybe for some folks, when they're away from center, they take on too much, right? It's too much. Yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do that, without connecting to themselves authentically. Like, what do I really have capacity for?
Mm-hmm.
What's really, you said something that resonates with me too. What's really important, right?
Mm.
We're consumed in a world of this is urgent, everything is urgent, and not necessarily focused on what's really important. Folks could find themselves away from their center when they're really reactive. And I know for me, that happens most often with the people I love the most, right? Our family, our loved ones, our partners, maybe. So the first step is noticing, being able to actually even kind of navigate, where am I? And then building some practices to recenter, to return to the present moment, to return. And that could literally, we can get really complicated with these things, but you don't need to. It can literally be, can I feel my feet planted on the ground? Because if I can feel my feet planted on the ground, I'm back here. I'm here. Mm-hmm. Can I feel a breath or two moving through my body? Can I feel a couple of beats of my heart? Something that anchors me back in what's real, right? Which is the only thing that's really real is this present moment. Everything else is either a memory or something we're making up in our head about the future. So yeah, those two pieces, being able to really know when you've gone away from your center, know when you've departed yourself and left and gone up into dreamland, and then finding some practices that can bring you back.
Yeah. And I think too, maybe some of us, and I'll include myself in this, but where we sometimes feel like, oh, I should have known better, or now I'm out of, alignment, or we're feeling like, oh,
and now I'm wrong, and I'm bad, and I'm judging myself. And instead of doing a practice to get back, I just get stuck in judgment, and I'm bad, and I'm wrong, and self-berating.
Right. Yes, exactly. And then when you hit that bottom, like you said, then it's really hard to find our way out, or to even give ourselves permission to find our way out. It's really interesting to me. Obviously, this is very natural for you. This is something that you've been at for a decade now. And I'm sure even before that, this was part of your life in some way, shape, or form. Was this something that you found as far as connecting with yourself, or did you feel out of alignment, or did you feel out of connection or disconnected when you were younger?
Yes.
How did this show up for you when you were younger?
Yes, and still do. And I would actually, I know you said it seems like it comes naturally. I actually want to just poke a hole in that. And it doesn't come naturally to me. And I think this is actually part of the bad PR that mindfulness gets, is that the people who do it, everybody else looks at them and goes, oh, it comes naturally to you. You get that. No, you're just that type of person. And I really am not. I think it just speaks to the power of practice. That anything we practice as a human, we get better at, right? We can totally suck at something. And most of us, when we try something new, we do totally suck at it. And often we get stuck in that self-judgmental, I'm bad, I'm bad at this, I suck at this, I'm not good, and then we let failure perpetuate more failure. So it doesn't come naturally, really, to me, to be honest. I think back to, I'm a really big proponent of mindfulness, obviously, and I think therapy is really powerful. And I think back to my childhood, and there's a lot that I don't remember. And what that tells me is that I wasn't there. Like I was there, my body was there, but my mind and my heart were somewhere else. I was escaping, I think everybody grows up with beautiful moments. I had beautiful moments. I grew up very, quite privileged in my life, but I still had difficulties. And I think part of my coping mechanism was just to leave myself, mentally go somewhere else. And so it does take practice, and it can be really tricky for folks. And I remember doing my first couple, meditations. So just to be really clear, some people get confused. Meditation is like the exercise. And when you do that exercise, you build the skill of mindfulness, being able to be present in the moment, no matter what. Just like lifting weights is the exercise, and it builds muscle strength. right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember first sitting down to do a 1-minute meditation, and my mind, I just couldn't get over how noisy it was in my own head. And so I was definitely one of those people who thought, I don't know how people do this. I'm just not good at this. It doesn't come naturally to me. But I was really lucky to have great teachers who said, it doesn't come naturally to anybody. Right? The human mind is made to think. It's this really powerful thing inside of our skull, and it's made to think. But when it's not trained, those thoughts can get the best of us, and they can actually rule our life. So part of learning to practice mindfulness is learning to see that those thoughts are there, but the thought, you sit in meditation, you have a thought, I'm bad at this. Most people, they would let that thought control them, and they would say, okay, then I quit. I'm done because my mind said I'm bad at this. Mindfulness teaches us how to see that thought and say, okay, it's just a thought. It might not be true. Maybe I don't want to believe it because I know what I'm here to do. I know I want to practice this technique. I know I want to reap the benefits. So yeah, maybe I'm bad at it, but I'm going to stay. I'm willing to stay and not let that one thought control my actions. And it's the same as if you're in traffic and somebody cuts you off and you have a thought that says, I should honk at them and roll down my window and swear. And, and then often in an untrained mind, we do all those things and then maybe we regret it and maybe who knows what happens, right? But a trained mind, you can see the thought and you can make a different decision or a different choice. The practice of mindfulness, it does reduce stress and things like that. So in a way, potentially it could lengthen our life because stress creates disease, disease can shorten our life. But generally, there isn't really anything to say meditating, practicing mindfulness is going to lengthen your life. But what it will do, and I can speak to this from experience and from folks who have been my students, what it does do is it helps you squeeze more juice, more goodness out of the moments that you already have in your life, right? Because you're there for them, right? You're not looking back and thinking, oh man, that, trip was really nice that we took, but I was just thinking about work the whole time, or you're maybe on a walk with your dog. And again, just thinking about, the stressful meeting you have the next day instead of really having this pure moment, almost like a snapshot. I find this is what I start to experience as I practice mindfulness. It's like I experience my life, and not all the time, but in like little snapshots where I'm really fully there. Just as an example, yesterday I was driving home from a physio appointment and there was a car in front of me and I was looking at the car and driving on just one of the little streets here in Banff. And the cutest little thing is I was looking, I see from the back seat of this car, a little tiny hand pokes out, right? It's like a little kid. They must be in the car seat or something. And they're feeling the breeze, right? As they're driving. And it was like I just had this little snapshot of that moment where I was just right there and I was like, oh, like that kid, you could see the kid's fingers moving and they, I was maybe recognizing a moment of presence in that little kid, like, oh, this is so nice. I can feel the wind in my, we don't do that as adults anymore because we're too busy. But I had this little moment of like, oh, I was kind of, I don't know, it was like osmosis or something. I was experiencing this really nice moment by seeing this little hand experiencing. So we can miss moments of our life when we're not mentally present for them. And we could be fully in a really beautiful moment, something simple like that, or even something bigger, a beautiful vacation moment of your life. You can physically be there, but mentally you can be somewhere else. Yeah. And so in ways we're physically present for these moments of our life, but we're mentally not there.
Exactly. And what's really interesting, and you had said this in one of the master classes that I listened to, which was really fantastic. And I think will resonate with a lot of people that are listening. So my work as a connection strategy coach is really to work with anyone planning or promoting their own events. So entrepreneurs, business owners, might be a nonprofit team. Things have changed with events. And so there is a lot of busyness and anxiety and questions. And, there were a lot of questions during the lockdowns, but I find now it's almost there's a drive to get back to what it was or a normal that we are not able to. It's different now. We've changed, society's changed, events have changed, I think, forever. One thing that you said in the masterclass, which I want to just refer to my notes because it was really important to me. You talked about this concept of time famine and time affluence. And I think as busy professionals, people that are out there trying to do the best they can, and honestly, I believe it's coming from a good place. We want to serve the people that we're working with, our teams, guests that are going to be at these events. But we get into, I think, sometimes locked into the busyness sort of hamster wheel. Could you tell us a little bit, if you're open to that, about this time famine? What does that actually mean? And then time affluence. Yeah. Which almost feels like, ooh, that's a luxury, but
yeah, it's like, who's out there experiencing that?
I know. Don't shut us off quite yet till she's explained it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so time famine was a term that was coined, I believe, and people might want to fact check this, but I think it was back in the 90s. And time famine, I mean, even just as you hear the words, like maybe even your folks that are listening, they can like, time famine, what does that feel like in my body? Like for me, just things start to like tighten up. My shoulders start to like go toward my ears. My jaw gets tight. My chest gets tight. Because famine is like to be starving for something. And essentially it was coined, this term, because it's this pervasive feeling that folks in kind of our dominant culture, our Western culture, our capitalistic culture feel, where it's like you have too much to do and not enough time to do it. So to me, when I experience time famine, which I'm pleased to report I experience it less now than I used to. I really benefit, or I really credit mindfulness for that, my practice. But it's this feeling of like, when you see somebody you haven't seen in a really long time and they're like, how are you? And the first thing you say is like, I'm so busy. Life's so busy. That to me, if I'm saying that, I'm in time famine. Or I often say this kind of tongue in cheek in some of my keynotes. I'll say, or it's the feeling of coming to a mindfulness keynote presentation and thinking this could be really good for me. But the first thought that comes into your head is, I don't have time. You might be in time famine if you're thinking that. So the thing about time famine, I mean, we can connect it to like productivity, right? A lot of people are like, I'm so busy. I have too much to do, not enough time. How do I be more productive? So you could go on Google right now, productivity hacks. You're going to get probably thousands of hits, if not more, blogs and videos. And how do we do more with less time? And we've got all of these pieces of technology. I mean, I got one smartwatch, we've got apps, we got all the things that are supposed to help us do more with not less time, but the same amount of time we've always had. But what they found, there was research done around time famine. What was found was that when we try to go faster, because that's what we think we need to do. I have too much to do, not enough time. I need to go faster. Need my productivity hacks. It actually amplifies this feeling of time famine. It amplifies it, turns up the volume on it, the faster you try to go. And what they found in the research was the actual remedy. The only remedy to time famine is slowing down. When we slow down, then we can move toward what they ended up coining this other term, time affluence, feeling like you have more than enough time, feeling like time is expanding. And so to me, I often am promoting the practice of mindfulness as an opportunity to slow down, to take a break, an intentional break, so that you're caring for yourself, so that you're, focusing your mind. Imagine if you have 5 tasks on the go and you don't take a break and you rush through them all, and it gets to 4 o'clock in your day and you've gotten through them all, but you go back and you see you made a horrible mistake because your mind was distracted. You weren't focused. You were exhausted. You were, you hadn't taken care of your emotional well-being, or something was, you just got off course. Whereas if maybe halfway through the day you had taken a moment, taken a break, connected with yourself, right? being more intentional. Okay, here's my next project I want to do, focusing on it. This is maybe I need to be careful about these little pieces. I could make mistakes. So I need to, just really focus your mind. Potentially 4:00 hits and you've gotten more than that done and you haven't made the mistakes. You don't have to go back, double back and fix things. What we know is that, multitasking, obviously probably a product of time famine. I'm going to do all the things at once because I don't have enough time. Multitasking actually reduces our productivity by 40%. We're more stressed out. We make more mistakes when we multitask. And making mistakes is directly correlated to things taking longer because you got to do them again, right?
Right.
It's like I remember in the past, trying to cook dinner and you get, I think I was making a curry or something, get it kind of simmering on the stove. Great, Kate, it's cooking. I'm going to answer some emails. I go answer some emails. I turn back and it's boiling over.
Yes.
So I was trying to save time, but now I got to start all over again because dinner's ruined. So it's actually going to make me take way more time.
Exactly. Well, and I think too, in that, the idea of being mindful, even in the stressful work environment, and I know you work a lot with workplace wellness or workplace mindfulness, I think you might call it. What does that look like when you actually start to interject that into a workplace? It actually is one of our culture commitments here at Candy is playfulness. How do you work with a team like that when the stakes are high, there's deadlines to be met, they'll be judged on their performance. So this might be, if they get that promotion or not, it might be dependent on that. How do you work with a team like that when you want to say slow down and they're kind of looking at you like, what?
Yeah, totally. And you know what? There are always skeptics. I actually have a specific presentation theme that is like mindfulness for the busy and skeptical.
Oh, there you go.
So what's really important, I find with folks who are skeptics, and like I said, I have a healthy amount of skepticism too. So I love presenting and working with people like that. I focus on a lot of the data because again, there is now like 40 years of research that we can pull on. And I also share with them not only like my own experience, but I share, there's a ton of anecdotal information out there now. So, Arianna Huffington, super well known. She's got a whole book about basically her burnout and her realizing what she needed to do to come back to her center, to reconnect, to really help herself, to support herself so she could do the work that she loves. And I get people to really question this belief that she talks about in her book. And it's something that I worked through on my own about 10 years ago. This perpetual belief we have in the Western world and dominant culture that stress equals success. So I actually call it out to people and I'll say, this is a belief a lot of us hold. We may not talk about it, but do the people in your workplace who work a ton of overtime, do the people who run around like chickens with their head cut off at work, are they the ones that we put on a pedestal? Are they the ones that are getting promotions? Are they the ones who are, everybody's just trying to reach that point? Because we often get stuck in this belief that we want to be successful. Success equals a certain, number in your bank account, a certain car in your driveway, a certain home size, look, renovations. And so that means, money. That means, okay, well, if I want to get there, I need to be really stressed out, right? And I saw it on, in my own kind of career journey, working through mostly not-for-profits, there was just this underscoring belief that the stressed out people were like the best team members. But what we know now, and then I also will share with teams this information, stress doesn't equal success. A stressed out brain is not a successful brain. You're not creative. You're not strategic. You're exhausted. A positive brain. So your brain can be in different states. It can be in a positive state. And I don't mean like sunshine and rainbows, but I mean like optimistic state. It can be in a neutral state, a stressed out state, or a negative state. By far, to achieve more quote unquote success personally, professionally, we want to be in a positive brain state. Our intelligence rises, our creativity rises. There were studies that doctors make more accurate prognoses when their brain is in a positive state. Salespeople secure more sales when their brains are in a positive state. And then, there's several things we can do to get our brain in a positive state, and mindfulness is one of those. So I share with them that actually it's like the data does not support stress meaning success for you. It actually is the exact opposite. So if we really want to have our teams reach new levels of success, personally reach new levels of success, the data shows that this is going to help you.
My sister, we grew up where we were very involved in the community ever since I was little. My parents were very involved, and we joke sometimes, even now, that our suppers were like a committee meeting where we had to give updates on what's going on with that coffee house and what's going on with that kids club and what's going on with so we'd go around the table and it was like an update on what's going on. I must have been 13, 15.
I love it.
And my sister used to tease me because I would be very busy and externally, I think in some cases motivated, because people would be like, oh, you're so busy. You must just be, really working hard and doing all this good. And nonprofit, like you said, can be one of those spaces where people will praise those that are really working their tails off. And the puppy dog eyes, she's like, don't give me those puppy dog eyes. Cause I'd be like, I just need, like, she would know when I'm in I just need help. I don't have someone to whatever, set up the popcorn or something. But you learn. And I think that's also why I experienced burnout in my early 20s, right? Because I had come through not really understanding what it looked like to manage the things that I loved. So there were definitely pieces of that I loved to do and people I loved to work with. And so it wasn't all terrible. It's not like I was, digging a ditch and hating it the whole time. And this was energizing things, but I think we get lost sometimes. And then again, dismembered in a way that in my 20s was really the first time I moved to Calgary was about a short term from Winnipeg to Calgary, short term ski hike, really investing in myself and exploring what I enjoyed and what was important to me back then. And it was really not everything was a fit. So I didn't even know. I'm like, well, do I pull that back? Like, is that really me? Or is that just something that I've done all my life? And reevaluating what that actually means for myself. So I appreciate what you're saying. I think we can start to rethink what that means to do work and life differently.
Yeah.
When we talk, what's going through my head, I'm like, I cannot get this episode out fast enough because I want so much for people to hear what you have to say and so many nuggets that we can take away from the conversation today. Thank you so much for being here. How does this actually become that ripple effect that can start to change the way that others think about their own world, their own work?
Well, the great news is that it just happens because humans are social beings and we're wired for connection. So this is something I also speak to, like a lot of leaders in organizations about. People will say, oh, my team is so stressed. They're so negative. They don't communicate well. They have got all this laundry list of complaints. And okay, great. Now I know, that I want my team to be in a positive brain state because that is how I'm going to get the most out of them. That's how we're going to achieve the most amount of success together. And okay, great. I'm just going to tell them, to practice more mindfulness. But it doesn't work like that. It works by embodying it. So the great news is, as long as there's someone out there listening who is interested in this and wants to practice, by default, as you become more mindful, as you become more present in your life, just by being that way, you will influence everybody around you. And, the world is it's like we're all dominoes, right? We will influence people who have nothing to do with us as well. Because what will happen is you show up to your job and now you're in a practice of mindfulness and you're feeling more optimistic. You show up with a calmer attitude in times of stress. You show up with resilience. You show up with compassion for the people who you lead. And we have these things called mirror neurons. And this is how it's really easy because we just get to set an example. So mirror neurons are the reason why I'm a child of, I grew up in the 90s. I was born in the 80s, but grew up in the 90s. That was my childhood. So if anyone is as old as me, has seen, it's a good thing, by the way, I'm happy to be, has seen America's Funniest Home Videos. Mirror neurons are what make you cringe when somebody gets hurt. Oh, right. When you see, or for younger people, fail videos.
Okay.
When you see a fail video and you cringe, that's a mirror neuron. Also, a mirror neuron is why we yawn when we see somebody else yawn. And mirror neurons actually help other people start to feel what you're feeling. And it goes both ways. So you're a leader, you show up at your workplace, or you're a leader doesn't have to be work-based. It can be you're a leader of your family, your community, right? Anybody, yourself. You show up and you're feeling more calm. You're feeling more confident, more present, more optimistic. Because of mirror neurons, the people around you are going to have a higher chance of being that way too. And if you show up stressed out, burnt out, overwhelmed, reactive, same goes. So as you begin to practice, it will naturally, it's like a little science experiment. It's just kind of flowing out of your pores. And it's the cliche of lead by example, but it's a cliche because it's true. And they call it emotional contagion, right? It's like, have you ever been around somebody who's overwhelmed and stressed and you were feeling fine, but now you're like, oh my God, now I'm like feeling all worked up. Emotional contagion. And it happens with everybody, and when you are in a leadership position, your emotional contagion multiplies. So all of a sudden, the way you're feeling has an even greater effect on the folks who are looking up to you. Wow. So all you need to do to spread this around anywhere you want is to practice it yourself. Focus on you, right? Focus on you, and it will naturally spread around.
Which is for many of us that we say we don't have time.
Yeah.
Now there's no reason, right? Because it's not about adding another layer to this or 15 layers above, and then we can have these conversations with our teams. It does put responsibility back on us to take that practice seriously, to have some fun with it, to meet with somebody like yourself, take a course with somebody like yourself. Thank you so much, Trish, for being here. If someone wants to continue this conversation, how can they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. Well, it's been my pleasure to be a guest. I've had so much fun having this conversation. And folks can find me at my website, which is Trish Tutton, TUTTON.com. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook, Trish Tutton as well. So they could find me there.
Awesome. And there's lots of ways, even if people are listening all over the world. So if there's lots of ways that they can connect with the work that you do, they don't have to be in Banff, although I would be encouraging anyone out there to take a trip if you haven't been. But I so appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to ways that we can collaborate together in the future and connect in different ways. But thank you again for being here.
Thanks, Lisa.
The Connector Next Door podcast is produced by Candy Event Consulting, where everyday event planners and their teams gain clarity, get connected, and grow in confidence. Subscribe at www.candyconsulting.ca to hear visits with everyday event planners who are putting connections first.